The departure of a head coach during an international tournament is an anomaly in professional basketball. A coach rarely leaves a national team bench and a global audience without significant internal pressure. This was the situation regarding Kara Lawson and Team USA. While the official narrative labeled the situation a coaching transition, the management of the roster suggested a deeper conflict. Throughout the early stages of the tournament, the world's most prominent player was utilized in a limited capacity even as she set multiple world records. The decision to restrict Caitlin Clark's minutes was viewed by many as a tactical failure that contradicted the objective of the program. The disconnect between Clark's talent and her role on the court was evident during the opening games. Despite her established shooting range and court vision, the offensive system remained stagnant. The coaching staff implemented a deliberate, slow-paced philosophy that appeared to suppress the team's natural transition game. Keeping a generational talent on the sideline while the offense struggled to find a rhythm was more than a questionable substitution. It was a strategic hindrance to the sport's progression. The friction began during the opening game against Senegal. Clark started on the bench, yet managed to break 5 FIBA world records in a single evening. She recorded the highest assist total for a USA debutante, dismantling records that had stood for decades in only 15 minutes of floor time. Lawson responded by returning Clark to the bench for the following game. At this point, criticism moved from social media speculation into mainstream sports journalism. The offense was characterized as slow and restrictive, a philosophy that ran counter to the strengths of the roster. Stephanie White, an assistant coach for the national team and head coach of the Indiana Fever, stated that the staff wanted Clark to play a controlled game. The goal was to force a player who sees the floor ahead of the defense into a rigid system. However, slowing Clark down did not just limit her individual production, it reduced the effectiveness of the entire team. A slower pace allowed opposing defenses to set up and play physically, turning potential blowouts into contested games. While Team USA continued to win, they did so based on raw talent despite the coaching staff's restrictive approach. During the game against Puerto Rico, Clark's minutes were reduced further. When Puerto Rico deployed a box-and-one defense specifically to stop her, the American coaching staff offered no tactical adjustments. Commentators struggled to explain why the most efficient player in the tournament remained on the sideline during critical moments. Despite the lack of support and the restrictive system, Clark finished the game leading the tournament in plus-minus and efficiency. She exerted a greater impact on the score than any other player on the floor while playing fewer minutes than the starters. The situation peaked during the post-game press conference. When asked directly about Clark's role, Lawson provided a vague response that avoided mentioning Clark by name. The interaction was described as cold and professionally awkward. Shortly after, Lawson was gone. By the third game, Nate Tibbetts was leading the team. There was no press release or official explanation for the sudden change. In high-stakes organizations like USA Basketball, such silence often indicates a move to manage a developing crisis. Reports suggest that leadership recognized the growing public relations damage and realized they could not enter a World Cup cycle with a coach who appeared to be at odds with their primary draw. Tibbetts, head coach of the Phoenix Mercury, immediately placed Clark in the starting lineup. The tactical adjustment was immediate. Under his direction, Team USA defeated New Zealand by 55 points. With Tibbetts leading the bench, the pace of the game increased. The team utilized better spacing and ball movement, allowing Clark to push the tempo in transition. The margin of victory grew from narrow leads to 30 and 40-point blowouts. Tibbetts publicly acknowledged Clark's impact and paired her with Kelsey Plum and Paige Buchers, creating a guard-heavy lineup that proved nearly impossible to defend. The shift marked the end of the slow ball era for the program. By the end of the week, Clark had established 14 FIBA world records. At 22 years old, she became the youngest player in history to be named tournament MVP. She achieved this despite the internal friction during the first half of the trip. The statistical evidence suggests that had the coaching change occurred sooner, the margins of victory would have likely been unprecedented. The situation carries significant implications for the WNBA and the Indiana Fever. Having served on the sideline in Puerto Rico, Stephanie White saw the consequences of attempting to limit a player of Clark's caliber. For the Fever organization, the data is clear. The team must be built around Clark's specific strengths to avoid both strategic and organizational failure. The attempt to contain Caitlin Clark through restrictive coaching has proven unsustainable. Her market value and record-breaking performances have made her role undeniable. While the official record may not provide the full details of Kara Lawson's departure, the narrative on the court was definitive. The youngest MVP in history has shown that when a system is designed to support her, the results are historic. The transition from the Lawson era to the Tibbetts era served as a case study in modern basketball management. While the scoreboard reflected a 55-point victory over New Zealand, the internal metrics provided a more comprehensive view of the shift. Under the previous regime, the average time per possession exceeded 18 seconds, a figure that ranked in the bottom quartile of the tournament. Under Tibbets, that number dropped to 12 seconds. This change was not merely a preference for speed, but a fundamental acknowledgement of the personnel on the roster. By allowing the ball to move through the hands of multiple playmakers rather than forcing it into a predetermined set, the offense became less predictable and significantly more efficient. The personnel changes also extended to the defensive end of the floor. Lawson's system prioritized a traditional drop coverage in pick-and-roll situations, which often left the perimeter vulnerable to high-percentage shots from international guards. Tibbets implemented a more versatile switching scheme that utilized the length and lateral quickness of players like Paige Buchers. This defensive adjustment forced opponents into a higher volume of contested mid-range shots, which fueled the transition game that Clark anchored. The synergy between a more aggressive defense and a high-tempo offense resulted in a plus-minus rating for the starting unit that exceeded any previous iteration of the national team in the modern era. The organizational silence following Lawson's departure led to intense scrutiny of the USA basketball hierarchy. Historically, the program has been characterized by its stability and a clear succession plan for its coaching staff. The abrupt removal of a head coach mid-tournament suggested a breakdown in communication between the coaching staff and the executive committee. Internal reports indicated that the decision was influenced by a growing concern over the long-term viability of the program's brand. With corporate sponsorships and broadcasting rights increasingly tied to the visibility and success of specific high-profile athletes, the perceived marginalization of a primary draw was viewed as a financial risk as much as a competitive one. The economic data surrounding the tournament supported this assessment. Television viewership for games in which Clark played significant minutes was nearly triple that of the games where her role was limited. For the first time in the history of international women's basketball, the individual metrics of a single player were directly influencing the commercial valuation of the entire tournament. This reality placed the governing body in a difficult position, maintaining the autonomy of the coaching staff while ensuring the commercial health of the sport. The resolution of this conflict favored the latter, establishing a precedent for how superstars are managed within the national team framework moving forward. As the focus shifted toward the upcoming WNBA season, the fallout from the tournament reached the Indiana Fever front office. Stephanie White's involvement in the initial coaching staff created a complex dynamic. Having witnessed the public and professional backlash resulting from the restrictive usage of Clark, White faced immediate pressure to demonstrate a different approach. The data from the tournament provided a clear blueprint. When Clark was permitted to operate as a primary decision-maker in a fast-paced environment, the efficiency of every player on the floor increased. For the Fever, this meant moving away from a traditional half-court offense and adopting a system that prioritized transition scoring and perimeter spacing. The technical analysis of the 14 records set during the tournament revealed a significant evolution in the point guard position. Clark did not just break records for assists and scoring, she redefined the distance from which an offense can be initiated. By consistently drawing double teams 30 feet from the basket, she created 4-on-3 advantages for her teammates before they even crossed the perimeter. This gravity changed the way opposing coaches prepared for Team USA. The box-and-one defense used by Puerto Rico, while initially effective due to a lack of tactical response from the American bench, eventually became a liability once Tibbets introduced lineups that featured 3 elite shooters simultaneously. In the semi-final matchup against Australia, the tactical maturation of the team was on full display. Australia, a team known for its physical interior presence and disciplined defensive rotations, attempted to slow the game down to a pace similar to what Lawson had preferred. Tibbets responded by utilizing a small ball lineup that featured Clark at the point, paired with Kelsey Plum and Jackie Young. This configuration forced the Australian centers to defend on the perimeter, effectively neutralizing their size advantage. The result was a 28-point win and a shooting percentage of nearly 60% from the field. The statistical impact on the rest of the roster was equally notable. Aja Wilson and Brianna Stewart, both established veterans, saw a significant increase in their scoring efficiency during the second half of the tournament. The space created by the threat of Clark's perimeter shot allowed the interior players more room to operate, leading to a higher percentage of uncontested shots at the rim. This debunked the earlier narrative that a system-first approach was necessary to balance the touches among multiple stars. Instead, the tournament demonstrated that an elite playmaker enhances the productivity of veteran superstars rather than diminishing it. The final game of the tournament was less a contest and more a formalization of the new hierarchy. Facing a highly ranked French team in the gold medal round, Team USA established a 20-point lead within the first 10 minutes. Clark recorded a double-double in assists and points before the start of the third quarter. The crowd, which included various international basketball executives and scouts, witnessed a style of play that many described as the future of the women's game. The final score reflected a level of dominance that had not been seen since the professionalization of the national team roster. Following the medal ceremony, the discourse within the basketball community shifted toward the long-term implications for Kara Lawson's professional career. While she remains a respected figure in the collegiate coaching ranks, the mid-tournament exit from the national team remains a significant mark on her resume. The lack of an official explanation from USA Basketball has allowed for continued speculation regarding the specific nature of her disagreement with the committee. Some suggest the conflict was purely tactical, while others point to a fundamental disagreement over the role of the modern athlete in a team structure. Regardless of the cause, the outcome established that even the most prestigious coaching positions are subject to the realities of performance and public perception. The role of Nate Tibbetts in this transition cannot be overstated. By stepping into a volatile situation and immediately prioritizing the strengths of the roster, he solidified his reputation as a coach capable of managing both elite talent and organizational pressure. His success with the national team has already led to discussions about his future within the USA Basketball program, with many seeing him as the primary candidate for the next Olympic cycle. His ability to balance a guard-heavy rotation while keeping his veteran post players engaged proved that a high-tempo offense is compatible with a star-studded roster. The broader impact on FIBA as an organization was also evident. The tournament saw record-breaking attendance figures and unprecedented digital engagement. The Clark effect translated into a global interest that exceeded previous World Cup and Olympic cycles. For FIBA, this success highlighted the need to modernize their marketing and broadcasting strategies to better highlight individual rivalries and star performances. The tournament served as a pivot point where the collective success of a national team became inextricably linked to the individual narrative of its most prominent player. In Indiana, the preparation for the upcoming season has been influenced by these international events. The Fever organization has actively recruited players who thrive in a high-velocity system, directly responding to the data gathered during the Tibbetts era. The objective is to ensure that the sabotage seen in the early games of the tournament is never repeated at the professional level. The focus is on maximizing the window of opportunity provided by having a generational talent on the roster, an effort that requires complete alignment between the coaching staff, the front office, and the players. The media coverage of the tournament also underwent a transformation. Traditional sports reporting, which often prioritizes team-oriented narratives and gritty defensive performances, was forced to adapt to a viewership that demanded technical analysis of offensive spacing and individual milestones. The shift in tone during the broadcasts, moving from confusion over Clark's limited minutes to a celebration of her record-breaking performances, mirrored the shift in the coaching staff. This change in the media landscape indicates a growing sophistication among women's basketball fans who are increasingly focused on the tactical nuances of the sport. Looking forward, the events of this tournament will likely be cited as the moment the old guard of basketball coaching was forced to reconcile with a new reality. The era of the system being more important than the star has been challenged by the undeniable success of a player-centric model. For Team USA, the challenge will be to maintain this momentum and avoid a return to the conservative philosophies that nearly derailed their tournament. The organizational structure of USA Basketball is expected to undergo a review to ensure that the communication failures that led to Lawson's departure are not repeated. The records set by Clark, 14 in total, stand as a benchmark for future generations. These are not just individual achievements, they represent a change in how the game is played. The highest assist total in a tournament, the most three-pointers in a single game, and the youngest MVP award are all markers of a shift in the competitive landscape. These statistics provide a factual basis for the argument that the sport is entering a period of unprecedented growth and technical evolution. As the WNBA season begins, the narrative will inevitably return to the rivalry between systems and players. However, the evidence from the international stage remains a permanent part of the record. The sabotage narrative, while controversial, was supported by the immediate and drastic improvement of the team following the coaching change. The data shows that when the constraints were removed, the team did not just win, they redefined the standard of excellence for international basketball. The final analysis of the tournament suggests that the disappearance of Kara Lawson was the inevitable conclusion of a clash between an outdated coaching philosophy and the requirements of the modern game. The sport has reached a point where the visibility of its stars is a primary driver of its success, and any attempt to obscure that visibility carries significant professional and financial consequences. The transition to Nate Tibbetts and the subsequent dominance of Team USA confirmed that the future of the sport lies in a high-tempo, space-oriented game anchored by elite playmakers. The youngest MVP in history has set a new trajectory for the sport, one that prioritizes efficiency, range, and transition play. The lessons learned during this tournament regarding coaching, organizational management, and the economic power of superstardom will resonate for years. The mystery of the coaching change may remain officially unexplained, but the results on the court provided all the necessary answers. The era of containment is over, and the era of the unrestricted superstar has begun. This shift is not limited to the United States. International programs have already begun to adjust their recruitment and training to account for the increased pace of play. The dominance of Team USA under a modern system has forced a global reassessment of how to compete at the highest level. Coaches in Europe, Asia, and Australia are now studying the film from the Tibbetts era to understand how to defend a system that initiates offense from the logo. The technical gap that Clark and her teammates created during those final games has become the new standard for international competition. Ultimately, the story of this tournament is one of correction. A program that was momentarily stuck in a regressive tactical cycle found its way back to dominance by embracing its most potent weapon. The success that followed was not a matter of luck, but a direct result of aligning strategy with talent. As the professional season takes over the headlines, the events of this international window remain a foundational chapter in the history of the sport, marking the point where the potential of women's basketball was finally allowed to meet the reality of its greatest players.